Phineas and Ferb's 5th season only has one real problem. You can rudely point your greasy finger at the animation, the humor, or how they're handling Candace and Doofenshmirtz's character arcs, but none of those are really problematic at all. The real issue nobody seems to be talking about is how the season is extremely claustrophobic. Because of the long hiatus between seasons, the writer's room is bursting with new excellent ideas, premises, and concepts that are so ambitious that those 10 minutes of a standard segment's runtime don't really suffice anymore to bring their vision to life and to do the concept justice. Of course, if you want to tell a short, self-contained little story, you can always use the usual formula. After all, I never failed the show ever since season 1. You can have a short episode, aka an 11-minute segment, that's entertaining, simple, and fun to watch without thinking too much about it. However, when you have huge ideas that just wanna break the mold, 11 minutes suddenly don't suffice anymore to contain them. And by trying to shoehorn an ambitious story in a tight little runtime, the story doesn't get to develop fully, causing some of its passages to feel unnatural and contrived, because important puzzle pieces are missing. And that's what happened in season 5. You can tell the writers had certain ideas that they really wanted to explore, but they had to limit themselves because of runtime constraints. So an important subplot, a character arc, or a passage ends up being condensed into a single line of dialogue instead of thriving with the appropriate amount of screen time it needs. Because of this though, quite a few episodes this season don't reach their full potential, and the entire season feels less unique and memorable as a result, since it almost entirely relies on short, regular, and sometimes forgettable little segments with almost no specials to break up the pattern or leave a bigger impact. In fact, more often than not, season 5's episodes are not in a great story, faulty execution sort of situation, because the execution is often pretty good, especially for what a 10-minute episode can accomplish, yet their stories would have been 4 times as captivating had they had twice as much screen time to work with, often wasting the huge potential certain premises had. So to prove my point, and prove just how crammed some episodes are, I'd like to bring a few examples to your attention, and after that, we'll dive into the real reasons behind this shared aversion to a longer format among both the writers and the network. Think of The Battle Days, an episode I didn't particularly enjoy at first, but when I came back to it I realized just what a huge potential it had. It's a story about generational trauma, about Doof struggling with change, Vanessa going to Drusselstein for the very first time ever, and both of them trying to become citizens, with the main That's one hard word to pronounce. The main citizenship test being a father-daughter kickball competition, the very sport Doof's mom's love was always inexplicably linked to, the sports that caused Doof so much heartache since he was a kid. It's the perfect premise for a super wholesome Doofenshmirtz story. Yet, we move so very quickly from one place to another and don't explore any of these aspects thoroughly enough. Of course, there's just not enough time. Olivia Olsen mentioned that at some point during production, this episode clocked in at about 17 minutes, yet here we are with the final episode lasting just 11 minutes. They had a more elaborate story in mind for this one, but they had to cram it all into an 11-minute time slot, and you can tell they had to shoehorn something elaborate into a teeny tiny little container here. Notice how Doof learns his lesson in under 30 seconds, how he and Vanessa pass the test with extreme ease, and it's not even supposed to be a joke, and Doof's song is even interrupted by the goat. Oh my god, not the goat again. Not to mention, the story itself is quite fast-paced and doesn't flow very naturally. So much so that, again, you can tell exactly where they had to make some of those cuts. Like here, where first, Doof reveals he never became a citizen, and then we jump right into the challenges he successfully passed and failed.
I was never able to complete my citizenship test when I was your age, so I'm doing it now, is what I'm saying. I was able to complete wrangling a pig.
And it's so unnatural. Next, let's take Dinner Reservations, another episode with a unique premise, which was exactly what I wanted to see with this Monty Nessa storyline. The 7 of them having a family dinner together. It's a dream come true for me, and I know I need better dreams, but let me have this. So now, this is the climax we've been building up to since season 3, the moment Doof and Monogram finally learned about this star-crossed romance, yet the story is extremely fast-paced again, and the main conflict after the toilet scene seems to be centered around Doof and Monogram playing with food. But we're 6 minutes in and the family's barely interacted at all. Yes, the dads bicker, but they don't even address the romance. In the end, things get out of hand and Perry saves the day. But where's the romance? The star-crossed love we were talking about a minute ago, where did it go? Wasn't that the focus of the story? There's nothing wrong with the food fight in itself, but it would have worked way better had it started, for instance, after Doof and Monogram kept taking jabs at one another's child, for instance, or maybe gotten to grow suspicious of each other's motives. After all that, on the verge of a breakdown while trying to keep it all together for their children's sake, they just nap and everything goes south with the final food fight. That would have been more than appropriate considering the purpose of that dinner. As is, it seems like Doof was more interested in his innator rather than the whole romance thing, which again was the whole point. In fact, Monty and Vanessa themselves barely said a word during that dinner. Well, how could they with this tight runtime? This is one of those stories that just needs more time to breathe. Phineas, Ferb, and Candace's side of the story was cut to the bone too, borrowing just 2.5 minutes from the episode's runtime. Then of course, Carl and Norm were present, but weren't involved in the story at all, despite the fact that season 4 had Carl find out about the relationship in My Sweet Ride, and then agree to keep it a secret in Thanks But No Thanks. So why aren't we building on that? It would have been the perfect occasion for Monogram to get mad at Carl for hiding the truth from him. That's something interesting that could have come out of that too. Maybe the writers prefer to take baby steps with the storyline, and they will eventually address Carl's involvement, explore Doof and Monogram's rivalry in detail, all in due time, but given the ending, I highly doubt it. In fact, the episode ends on a super weird note, as Vanessa wonders whether she and Monty want a date because they really like each other, or if it's just because they enjoy messing with their dads.
Can't it be both?
It can be both.
But where was this going? And how was it connected to anything that happened in the episode? Yes, they liked the secretive aspect of their relationship, but they never necessarily enjoyed seeing their dads lose it. Actually, that's the very thing they wanted to avoid this episode. Where is this coming from? You can tell they had a story thread here they wanted to build on, maybe foreshadowing Vanessa having second thoughts about their relationship, but a 10-minute segment didn't give them nearly enough time to lay the foundations for it. They ambitiously and justifiably wanted to explore Doof and Monogram not approving of the relationship, while also setting up some drama between the lovebirds, which is a wonderful idea, but you can't properly do that in a short little segment like this. You need 20 minutes. And without getting too much into detail, episodes like Dooflicated and Drugenfest also had such unique premises that they could have easily justified a longer runtime. Evil Phineas, Ferb, and their friends could easily carry a longer episode, especially if combined with the subplot of Doof thinking Vanessa likes Roger more than him, which is yet another concept we didn't spend nearly enough time with. It was mostly just the setup for the main Candace storyline, but it was totally worth exploring in detail in a couple more minutes. And what about Doof and Isabella's partnership and rivalry in Drugenfest? Again, you can notice some sudden jumps within the story caused by the runtime constraint. As Doof eats a piece of the final Drugen, he spits it out because he doesn't like the taste, so Isabella says that she hopes she'll never have to work with him ever again. That's a bit of an overreaction though. He's just been mildly annoying and only helped her so far. Devoting 10 more minutes to the story could have allowed Doof and Isa to actually bump heads as they work together, rather than shoving everything into a montage where everything works out instantly anyway. The two didn't even spend 4 minutes together in the episode. Plus, Isabella realizing it was Doof's fault all along played absolutely no role in the whole story. Maybe that's how they wanted it, because they wanted to keep the conflict going for a possible future episode on them, but this episode really could have used that extra layer of drama in it. Once again, an excellent concept that could have easily fueled a 20-minute special, perhaps making the most of the high stakes for the tri-state area rather than solely focusing on the Drugen. Finally, when we talked about the season finale 2 videos ago, I had a whole section dedicated to the pacing and the runtime, but ironically enough, I cut it out to make the video a bit shorter. But I did want to point out how, despite the episode being excellent the way it is, most of its minor flaws could have easily been fixed by extending the story to a 40-minute runtime. And we surely had enough material and enough tweaks to do to reach the 44-minute mark. Between slowing down some fast-paced sequences, especially after Candace and the gang enter the building and before Vanessa shows them the coin collection, giving the main villain a more threatening vibe, giving Isabella a subplot worthy of this name, and a few more songs to the characters since it is a musical, it's in the title, while also fixing this bit of Doof, Vanessa and Perry returning to the penthouse unprepared, despite Vanessa clearly stating she had a plan, but nothing came of it, and maybe even having Candace and the gang check on Vanessa after the Vampocalypse is over, just because, well, they saw her fight the machines up in the penthouse, but never went back to see if she was okay, despite them all knowing her and being her friends? With a longer runtime, all these fixes could have been pretty easy, and the season finale could have felt way more epic and cinematic, elevating the story to a Night of the Living Pharmacist status. Again, it wasn't needed, but it would have been a much appreciated improvement and one heck of a special episode. Now these are all perfect examples of how a longer runtime would have taken these episodes to the next level, but to be fair, that's not always the case. Let me be clear, not every episode works better as a 20-minute special, let alone 40. I know it's pretty obvious to you specifically, but some people really don't want to understand, so I'd rather clarify. I'm fully aware that you can't extend a premise like Elevator Irritator for too long. Otherwise, it is actually going to be, unironically, quite irritating indeed. This story works best as a short segment, and I personally love how this one turned out. Likewise, what about the episode Space Adventure? The fact that it's only 10 minutes long is a blessing, because it's already pretty bad as is, so it's a great thing it's short. So I'm not saying the season needed to completely erase all of its 11-minute segments, of course not. The key here is balance, a balance that was completely thrown off. So maybe you're wondering whether things were always like this. Did we always get so few special episodes in the past as well? Well, no, not really, no. I've actually done a little numerical research and prepared some charts and tables to sum up how the previous seasons handled the special to regular episode ratio, so let's see how things changed over time. Roughly 25% of season 1 consisted of special episodes, which were exclusively half hours, like Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together. Season 2 built on that, as 30% of it was made up of special episodes, including the show's first 40-minute episode ever, Summer Belongs to You. Season 3 slumped and went down to a measly 17%. And so far, the amount of special episodes seems to be kinda proportional to how much I personally enjoyed each season. Go figure. But by the time season 4 rolled around, the show realized just how excellent its special episodes were, so the percentage went up to a whopping 56%, meaning most of the season consisted of special episodes. Or, to be even more dramatic, about 2/3 of the season's runtime was dedicated to these episodes. And honestly, that's exactly what made season 4 so unique. Sure, it gave us Mission Marvel, which is a little flawed, but we also got Night of the Living Pharmacists, Last Day of Summer, the Star Wars special, and even Act Your Age, which you know how I personally feel about it, but it is one of the most universally loved episodes of the show. All these are top tier episodes almost every Phineas and Ferb fan adores. And then there's season 5, whose special episodes barely amount to 15% of the season, for a total of 3 half-hour specials. And just 3 episodes, in a way makes sense, because it is the shortest season yet, and the ratio is close enough to season 3's, but it doesn't feel like the right balance at this stage in the show's development, especially when the writers had so many fresh new ideas to offer. We'll get to talk about this a little more in detail later on, but I honestly can't think of any season 3 plot that deserved extra runtime as much as these season 5 stories do. Simply because these ones are so much bigger in scope and way more ambitious. Precisely because this season is bursting with new ideas, it desperately needs, more than any other season before it, except maybe for season 4, many more elaborate episodes, and to dare lean into this longer format when necessary. So the real question at this point is why? Why does this season only have 3 specials? Wasn't it obvious enough for the writers that season 4 stood out precisely because of those episodes? The show managed to stay fresh over the years, maintaining such a high quality, in part thanks to season 4 specials, which put a different spin on old formulas and structures especially, playing by different rules, providing story progression and complex storytelling. So there's not just one reason. I believe there's 3 different factors at play here, plus a nice additional element that's also fueling this problem, albeit indirectly. The first and probably simplest reason behind this narrative downsizing is that special episodes are simply harder to write. As Olivia Olson explained, the writers always try to implement some kind of moral or lesson in these specials. It's an extra element or layer that regular episodes usually don't have. So this must discourage the writers from working on them. Crafting a significant and satisfying message your audience will appreciate is just an extra effort they willingly decide to put into specials, which is part of the reason why they work so well. It makes sense if in the end The Battle Days doesn't manage to deliver a heartfelt message that moves its viewers to tears. It's fine, it's a short episode, expectations are low anyway. But when the audience is watching a longer episode, after investing 20 to 40 minutes of their time and attention, they expect something in return. A satisfying story, a character arc, some unexpected developments, story progression, or some lovely heartfelt message. Any of these will suffice, but you can't leave them with nothing. Then of course, a second factor concerns the network. The executives might have expressly requested less specials simply because 11-minute segments do a better job at keeping the viewers engaged and their attention spans active. This is also a smart move to increase variety and again, consequently boost viewer retention. Even if a given segment doesn't work for me, generic viewer, it's okay, it'll be over in a matter of minutes and I'll get to the next one fast. So I don't even worry about it too much and simply push through it. A 20 or 40-minute episode instead has a higher potential of discouraging viewers to stick around in case of a negative reception, causing them to either skip it, or even worse, stop binge watching altogether. And bingeability is crucial for streaming platforms. That's why shorter episodes are some of these platforms' strongest allies, hence why in this streaming-dominated era in general, we get so many short seasons made up of short episodes. It's a matter of retention. That's why the only 3 episodes that break the pattern are the pilot, being a 2-parter, and the season finale to start and end things with a bang, and the Meep episode, which was the one episode everyone's been waiting for since 2012. But this was the bare minimum. Anything beyond those 3 episodes wasn't a guaranteed success, so to minimize the risks, they stopped right there and didn't dare go for a 4th one. Then the third and possibly main factor behind this 11-minute squeeze, if you will, has to do with the show's reception. It's a thing I like to call revival friction. You know how a revival should be able to balance old and new elements properly to avoid its self-destruction, and so far the writers are pretty much nailing it, as they're pulling off an almost perfect 1-to-1 ratio between new concepts and good old formulaic Phineas and Ferb episodes. However, there's another delicate balance to take into account. You see, to avoid becoming stale and resting on its laurels, with season 4 the show started going for more complex episodes that of course went hand in hand with the longer format. And now, after a decade-long break, given how there's no creative slump, the writers have even more fresh new ideas, so this is the perfect time to build on season 4's legacy, making said ideas breathe and shine, relying on that longer format to keep things fresh. It's just a natural evolution from a storytelling perspective. Yet, season 5 is not only the successor of season 4, it's also the start of a brand new era for the show, a new chapter, a new beginning. It's a critical moment in the show's entire existence, arguably the most critical, or second I guess after its introduction 20 years ago. So even though from the show standpoint, with season 4 the writing was evolving even in its format and its special to regular episode ratio, because of this hiatus, the evolution was pushed back. Because going back to what initially worked guarantees an optimal reception from fans. Relying more on a longer format now, at this critical juncture, could feel jarring to the viewer and would therefore be riskier for the show. One too many specials could might be seen as the show abandoning its roots, doing the revival to being perceived as too different from the original, therefore resulting in instant cancellation. I want you guys to remember that the Milo crossover and the Candace movie were mere breadcrumbs compared to a whole revival, which opens the door to a brand new era for the show. Phineas and Ferb is back in full force with the new content in its original form after a decade. This is what everyone is gonna be looking at, judging it, scrutinizing and examining it meticulously to see if it's still going strong, if it's worth watching, and especially if the new season is consistent with the show's original run. That's how we, fans, deal with reboots and revivals. In a way, the stakes are so much higher now compared to the day the first episode ever premiered. Revivals have the reputation of going wrong, so the potential of messing up is through the roof, especially when it's the writers who chose to end the show at first and then bring it back to life. So this is not the time to take risks. But the show is already exploring a brand new summer. Its universe was transplanted into the modern era, the characters aged, and so many storylines are finally being explored. There's already so many changes in a context where failing to stay true to the original can cause the show's instant downfall. Changing too much at the start of a revival is a death sentence. So something as significant as the format and the special to regular episode ratio must not be taken lightly. Relying more on them would drastically change how the show is perceived and experienced. So while creatively speaking, this would be an excellent time for that, strategically speaking, it's better to be cautious. You know, I love to repeat myself, but that's revival friction at its best. This phase of the show's rebirth is delaying its evolution, ironically, causing the amount of specials produced to be reduced. And strategy, of course, always plays a huge role in the grand scheme of things, but I would argue it plays an even bigger role in Phineas and Ferb's case specifically. I don't want you guys to forget that Disney isn't bringing Phineas and Ferb back because they're nostalgic. From a network perspective, this move was calculated to boost engagement across the board. The show is one of their longest running hits and a huge cash cow that's making insane streaming numbers on Disney+. If they want to keep this goldmine of a franchise growing, with all of its new merchandise, albums, shorts, now even a new movie and possibly a few more seasons down the line, they need to painstakingly plan every little detail ahead of time, planning this revival super carefully. Heck, they're even using the revival to artificially boost Disney Channel's cable ratings, which I hated because I don't have access to Disney Channel USA, living in Europe, so by dropping the second half of the season on TV before it makes it to Disney+, they're forcing the audience back to traditional broadcasts to catch the new episodes first. And there's not that many shows out there that can get people to do that. Disney loves the show and what it can do for them. Giving the writers plenty of creative freedom was certainly smart, and wanting to play it safe is the right move for the network to get the show to survive for as long as possible, and of course to earn them as much as possible too. So when faced with the possibility of consistently going for more specials, they'd rather not, at least for now. If the show won't be stopped again, artificially or not, cancelled or wrapped up too soon, then there might be room for it to evolve again in the same direction format-wise, finally embracing the specials and their potential. And finally, of course, there's the budget factor that's hurting the season's drive and creativity, but not the way you think. This is the additional indirect factor I was talking about. Of course, 40-minute episodes obviously tend to cost more compared to 4 shorter segments that ultimately amount to the same runtime, because between the creation of new assets like backgrounds, soundtracks, and even more elaborate animation for action scenes, there's also the production of promotional material for the episodes, because Dan Povenmire can't possibly do it all himself on TikTok. So there are simply more expenses. Are the costs an issue then? Partially, sure, they must have some impact on the decision to avoid 40-minute specials on some level, but when it comes to half-hour specials, costs don't play that big of a role compared to producing a pair of segments instead. They're even pretty easy to handle for schedules, since the network is always gonna air segments in pairs anyway, and producing a 20-minute special costs roughly the same as producing 2 11-minute stories. There are, however, some budget constraints that affect even shorter episodes, including 11-minute segments, and they're tied to the end credits. It seems weird, but hear me out. At the end of every Phineas and Ferb episode is always a 30-second sequence playing during the end credits. Oftentimes, it just consists of a repetition of a verse or two from the episode song, but more often than not, those extra 30 seconds reward the viewers with a few extra seconds of content. A new song, an extra joke, an aftermath, or an epilogue of sorts of the story. It was like a small thank you from the writers to the viewers, rewarding them for watching the whole thing and sticking around till the end. Super wholesome, I know. Moreover though, in practice, those end credit scenes often serve as 30 extra seconds to add to the narrative, so a wise use of them can impact the story's flow, giving the writers a little more wiggle room when needed. End credits are a huge element on the show, way more important than people even give them, well, credit for. Unfortunately though, that's an element that was lost in the transition between the first run of the show and the revival, amplifying the effect of the 11-minute squeeze even further. Let's go over this quickly. The show's end credit scenes generally fall into three main categories. First, we have those that play a brand new song or extra lyrics of an existing one. Lots of Me, Punky Momo, the police part of Busted, Music Makes Us Better, Monogram's theme song, Dr. Coconut, Rusted, Perry the Teenage Girl, you get it. Then there's the end credit scenes that provide extra jokes. Linda being nostalgic of her pop star career, Lauren singing Fossils, da da da, Doof winning the Summer Cotillion, or the farmer and his wife's second appearance.
And you didn't buy a single van! Not one word.
Thirdly, the largest category of all includes extra scenes that wrap up the episode. They're generally the final 30 seconds of the story that were animated but simply placed in the end credits to make everything fit into the standard runtime. Jeremy signing Candace's cast, or him giving her a birthday present, Isabella traveling back to the past to change the timeline, Rosie breaking up with Doofenshmirtz, Stacy hiding Perry's secret from Candace, or even them in the book club, Doof's lighthouse plan backfiring horribly, Doof inside of Pinky or on Mars, and plenty more, and heck, even the Meep trailers were entirely an end credit thing. Had it not been for the Meep trailer in the credits of the first episode, there would have been no Meep trilogy at all. So what about season 5? Out of 20 episodes, only 3 had unique end credits that didn't feature the repetition of a song or joke from the episode drawn out for 30 seconds, like this scene of the Baljeet suits on loop for half a minute. The 3 exceptions are The Bad Old Days, which I didn't expect to mention this often today, with Doof rambling while lying down on his old bedroom floor, which is probably my favorite, with Doof being Doof, without however really moving, so they didn't need to animate much there. Then Doof in Retrograde gave us a full version of the song Give Me the Food, the one with Linda rocking out at the drive-thru, and finally, the credits of the episode Bread Bowl Hot Tub did include a new song of the same name that was not featured in the episode itself. Yet, that was a song made by a fan on TikTok. Dan liked it so much that he played it in the credits, and it's a great song for sure, but had this girl not come up with it, the writers wouldn't have had anything planned for those credits, so they simply would have played a Commune with Nature once again. So no matter what, even these 3 unique end credits still don't bring anything new to the table from an animation standpoint. Visually, there's nothing new, and because of this, none of these played a role in their respective episode's narrative by adding an extra relevant scene to fix the pacing, and it was very much needed. It's clear this was all a budget thing. The easiest corner to cut is the end credits, and how to blame them? Still, this only contributed to making the stories feel as crammed as possible, as they couldn't even rely on 30 extra seconds of runtime. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. No, wait, I got confused. I mean, it's not a lot, but for an 11-minute episode, 30 seconds in the end credits amount to about 5% of extra runtime. It's not nothing, trust me. Once more though, this is an issue that has nothing to do with the writers or the efforts of anyone working on the series. It's the network, the budget, the viewers' nitpicking habits, and their justified skepticism towards revivals that make the show, let's say, reluctant to embrace the longer episode format. In fact, it's important to note that the crew is working extra hard on this season because of all these ulterior limitations they didn't have before. So the inconsistent animation, Doof and Candace going back to their old habits, Last Day of Summer being demoted to a mere season finale, Ferb and Jeremy having different voice actors, the GOAT joke that just won't stop returning. I mean, I hate the latter, but none of those are real issues. What the season has is a real estate problem. It's an incredibly creative season trapped inside a claustrophobic runtime. But if this season was just about laying the groundwork and proving Phineas and Ferb can still work in the modern era, then it succeeded. It's an experimental time for Phineas and Ferb, and just like during season 1 the show was trying to find its identity, with season 5 it's doing the exact thing all over again. The writers are getting the machine back in motion, figuring out what works, what doesn't, really testing the waters. Hopefully with season 6 they'll take these training wheels back off, and with less revival friction the episodes will have more room to stretch their legs. When I say the stories feel crammed, despite being negative in one way, it's also an extremely positive sign. It shows that the writers have extremely cool new ideas that wanna break the mold. That's just what you wanna see in a recently revived show. But hey, that's just my take on the current state of the revival. So do you agree that some of these episodes feel crammed, or do you prefer this faster paced approach with more concise stories? Let me know in the comments below. Also, I want you guys to remember that you're awesome, okay? I love you so much. Your comments always make my day in ways you can't even imagine. You are appreciated, you guys. You are appreciated. It's important to say these things, so let me say it. You're awesome, you rule. As always, I thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!